Welcome to Verbal Pick Radio, where we give you a verbal image of life, and we are everyday people. Like to welcome you all to the show. You know, watching this George Floyd's trial and the latest news that's coming out. Now, this latest story was written by the Wall Street Journal. Now, the Wall Street Journal is basically known for finances and stock, right? And if you all know, or some of you may not know, that stock was actually the slaves that was traded on the stock. They parade them around and they would bid on them and purchase them, and it stemmed from there, right? And we're going to tie all of this in together because it seems like they thought that they never release their stock, right? But time dictates the agenda, as Brother Nasir stated in the interview documentary we did with him. Okay, check this out. As a jury watched video footage of George Floyd's death, his family members watched along with them in the Minneapolis courthouse where the former police officer charged in his death is being tried. During the first week of testimony, prosecutors repeatedly played the bystander video, security footage, and body camera recordings of the deadly May 25th encounter between Mr. Floyd and former officer Derek-Chauvin, and questioned witnesses who were there that day. It hit me hard. It hit me hard, Rodney Floyd, Mr. Floyd's youngest brother, said of watching the trial, whether seated as the one family member allowed to sit in the courtroom or gathered with other family members in a private viewing room inside the courthouse. When he sat in the courtroom on March 31st, Rodney Floyd looked down, holding his hands and shaking his head. As video played of George Floyd struggling with officers as they tried to put him in a squad car. First of all, George Floyd was not struggling with officers as they tried to put him in a squad car. George Floyd was being choked out on the ground with one knee on his neck and another knee in his back. And George Floyd wasn't struggling. He was trying to find a place of comfort. He was trying to take deep breaths. He was doing everything he could to stay alive. But this goes to show you how words are being used and terminologies are being used to display a narrative of supremacy, right? Certain words that they attach to black people versus certain words that they attach to white people, right? For instance, the shooting in Colorado, the suspect was called a murderer. The shooting in Atlanta when the 6 Asians died, when he went and shot at the massage parlor, the white guy, he was stated to have had a bad day, right? And the thing about it is, like the song say, the whole world is watching. Everybody's watching. And they're like, and it's like, this the deal. It's like, even white people, you see an injustice, right? And they say, damn, man, that is messed up, but let me be quiet. But internally, you're struggling with something that's biased. And when you know it's biased, now you got to wrestle with yourself, right? Same thing with George Floyd on the street, right? So he couldn't move because he's on concrete. Concrete doesn't give, right? And on top of that, a man's knee is in his neck and the other knee is in his back, right? And the witnesses who watched that struggled with themselves because they wanted to run and push Derek-Chauvin off of George Floyd to do something, but fear choked them and they couldn't do it because they didn't want to get shot and go to jail. So they had to struggle with that. Right. Now, some said they had to leave the viewing room when video of Mr. Floyd's death played out. Others have avoided the courthouse altogether, saying they can't bear to see Mr. Chauvin, the first of 4 former officers involved in Mr. Floyd's arrest, to go on trial. The prosecution is expected to finish questioning its witnesses this week, including Minneapolis Police Chief Madera Arredondo, who testified Monday that Mr. Chauvin had violated multiple department policies during his fatal encounter with Mr. Floyd. The defense will then begin making its case for Mr. Chauvin, who has been charged with second and third degree murder and manslaughter. Mr. Chauvin, who prosecutors say held his knee in Mr. Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, and 3 other officers involved in the arrest, all were fired. Right. We're going to finish it, right? But I just want to say this. And this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. You started seeing kind of militarized vehicles coming into the police department. Then you start seeing tactical gear coming into the police department. Then you start seeing army or war-like weapons the officers were starting to carry. And it was like, who are they planning to go to war with? Right. And there were articles written on it, and the community was saying, wow, this looked more like y'all training to go to war. Right. And in some of these police officers' minds, they think that they are at war. And so when George Floyd, right, we're going to get into the different scenarios, right, racial scenarios dating back to slavery. George Floyd was handed a supposedly fake $20 bill. But if you got a cop who thinks he's at war, then okay, of course he's going to overdo it. He's at war. He's going to kill the enemy. And his mindset, his warped mindset. That's why you hear people saying, hey, man, we got to defund these police. We got to do something, because how can we change this mentality? You thought it would change after Tamir Rice. You thought it would change after Philando Castile. But no. It kept going. You thought it would change after George Floyd. No. Because of the mentality, right? Now, where does the mentality come from? Now, some say, okay, now let's look at, we're going to put it all on Derek Chauvin, right? We're going to put it all on him, representing the former slave master's children, right? Okay. Black men was killed for, look at Emmett Till, killed for wishing at a white woman. Black men was killed for dating, sleeping with a white woman. Matter of fact, at one point in time, there was a law that a black man couldn't look up under a white woman's dress if it was hanging from a clothesline. This is who we dealing with, right? Then George Floyd was driving a Mercedes-Benz. A lot of times, we all know white officers didn't like to see a black man driving in something nice. That could have got you killed, right? Then the fact that George Floyd's statue, he's tall, muscular. A lot of white men didn't like that. They felt inferior, so they used that badge and gun and baton to make themselves feel superior and force their will to where they're in a position to kill, as they did with George Floyd. So several different mindsets could have been running through Derek Chauvin all at one time, right? He's taking all that aggression and frustration out on George Floyd. As I stated, it's been going on for a long time in this country. Black man get killed for murder, for dating a white woman. You get murdered for that. Black man driving a fancy car and the police see you, they pulling you over. What are you doing in this car? You know? You know? Black man walking proud or got his chest stuck out. Put your chest back in, boy, or take that bass out your voice. Or it's always been those type of nuances that would offend some, and that could get some killed. Brandon Williams, George Floyd's nephew, said he found listening to testimony from inside the courtroom intense because it was hard for him to watch footage of his uncle's encounter with police. Mr. Williams, like other members of his family who have been in the courtroom, appeared to focus on witnesses or the jury, many of whom took notes throughout the week. Mr. Williams said the teenagers testifying the day he was in the courtroom seemed still shaken up by what they had seen on May 25th. Now, check this out. You got officers in tactical gear, warlike mindset, and the public is not ready for that. So when they saw a man being tortured to death to where he was murdered, it shook those who were there. It shook their reality. It damaged their foundation. And there's nothing you can do to repair that. And that's why you can't let these officers, so-called officers, walk away. Because the psyche of America, it's going to take years to be put back together. Because he crossed the line and went too far. That wasn't policing. That was torture, as you would do a prisoner of war. Tortured him right on the concrete and on the sidewalk. I mean, it was actually ridiculous to see that being played over and over again. Now, this is Brandon Williams, George Floyd nephew. I dropped tears in the courtroom, said Mr. Williams, who wears a gold chain around his neck from which hangs a miniature portrait of his uncle. Right. You know, Wall Street, they got to show you gold money. That's what Wall Street does. That's their business, right? Who wears a gold chain around his neck from which hangs a miniature portrait of his uncle. It's hard to relive that moment and watch those videos over and over. But then again, we know that we have to be strong because we want justice more than anything. Mr. Williams said it was a shock for the family to learn during opening arguments that Mr. Chauvin had knelt on Mr. Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. The original estimate was 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It was mind-blowing. You tortured a man for over 9 minutes in broad daylight, as if you was in Afghanistan, or as if you was at war over a $20 bill that was supposed to be fake, a misdemeanor. That means that his mindset, and I'm talking about derek-chauvin, had went rabid. He lost it. His mental capacity to hold that office in that position had left. He shouldn't even been out on the streets. So that means that the Minneapolis failed, the police department failed, or some would say, well, white privilege, hey man, we know you, just try to get it together because we don't want to come down hard on you. It might upset some people, but you got this rabid dog out there, attacking and giving people rabies and murdering folks. Wow. It was mind-blowing, he said, adding that he understands why some of his family members, including his mom, have decided they can't be in the courtroom because they don't want to see Mr. Chauvin. When you're in the courtroom and you're looking at him and you know that's the man that took the person that you love so much away from you, you get a lot of evil and bad thoughts running through your head. I mean, wow, 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 wow. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner has ruled Mr. Floyd's death a homicide. Yeah, let me stop right there. His death was a homicide caused by murder, as if someone put their hands around someone's neck and choked them for 9 minutes while people stood by and watched, as if they was watching a real live tactical war maneuver being played out in the streets of America. Choked him out. Right. And there nothing anyone could do, because that mad dog would have turned his weapon and killed anybody who dared try to save the life of a black man in 2021. And he was so sick and didn't realize that you damaging the lives of your own people. You damaging their mentality from watching one of their own be so savagely brutal in 2021. They're ashamed of you. You didn't know when the gig was up. Well, you're getting ready to know the gig is up. If you didn't know then, you're gonna know pretty soon. But that's the state that we're in today. You put all these tactical, warlike weapons and vehicles on the streets, and you put them in the hands of madmen, and what do you think was going to happen? Those are gear that's for theaters of war, not on the streets in America, unless you at war, and who you at war with, and for what reason? I don't know, but it's a lot of questions that needs to be answered, man, and the reason being is because you can't display an image of brutality, hatred, warlike tactics in America today without being justified. That means that you're being the biggest bully of them all, and America and society don't like bullies. Verbal Pick Radio, we're out reminding you all, go to hfsport1.com and register for your chance to win a 2016 Maserati. I'd like to thank A-Tone Productions, Low Key, Pebble, Sonera Smith, and so many, man. Big shout out. High Frequency Clothing Line, Eaton. What's going on, Eaton? And everybody, man, that's different out there putting it down. Verbal Pick Radio, we out.